It was one of those wet, glistening nights when everything feels too quiet, like the world is holding its breath. I remember the sky was a heavy charcoal gray and the streets were slick with rain. I was parked just down the street from La Vita, an Italian place Linda used to rave about when we first started dating. Candlelit tables, handmade pasta, the works. We hadn't been there together in over a year. She said she had a work dinner. Client from Portland, she told me earlier that morning as she rifled through her closet, pulling out a dress I hadn't seen in months. One of those deep navy numbers that hugged her frame in a way I used to find magnetic. Big pitch, she added, tossing her heels in a bag. Don't wait up. But here's the thing, I hadn't planned to wait. I hadn't planned to do anything. At least, not until around 8:45 p.m. when something about her tone from earlier started gnawing at me. There was a rehearsed quality to it, too polished. It wasn't her usual flustered, late for a meeting kind of energy. It was staged. So I got in the car under the pretense of bringing her the umbrella she forgot. Truth was, I didn't know what I was looking for until I found it. The restaurant was dimly lit but cozy, framed by tall windows fogged with condensation. Through the glass, I spotted her almost immediately, table in the back, beneath a chandelier dripping crystals like icicles. She wasn't with a group. Not even 2 or 3 coworkers. It was just her and a man. A man I didn't recognize. He leaned in close, like they were sharing something secret, and she was smiling in that slow, deliberate way she used to save for quiet moments at home. What hit me hardest, though, wasn't the proximity, it was the way her hand rested casually on his knee like it belonged there. Like it had been there before. I froze. My heart didn't beat faster like you'd expect. It slowed. Everything around me dimmed until there was just that scene framed behind the glass, her, him, a candle flickering between them like a lie burning steadily in plain sight. I raised my phone. Snapped a photo. My hand shook so badly I had to take another. Then I turned and walked away before my legs gave out beneath me. I didn't go in. I couldn't. What would I say? That I'd come all the way downtown to catch her in something I didn't even want to believe was real? I sat in the car for 15 minutes staring at that photo. It wasn't graphic or scandalous. If a stranger saw it, they'd probably think nothing of it. But I knew Linda. I knew her mannerisms, her little tells. That touch wasn't business. That smile wasn't for a coworker. That was an asterisk Macy. Familiarity. And it gutted me. She texted me at 10:17 p.m. Running a bit late. Rain's a mess. Love you. I didn't respond. Just drove home in silence. By the time I heard the garage door open an hour later, I'd convinced myself to play it cool, to give her the benefit of the doubt, at least for a moment. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation. Maybe I'd overreacted. But the second she walked in, all that hope evaporated. She was humming. Actually humming. Like someone coming back from a massage or a spa day. Her coat was dry, too dry for the kind of rain coming down. She paused when she saw me standing at the edge of the kitchen. Hey, she said, a little startled. Didn't expect you to be up. I brought your umbrella, I said flatly. She blinked, then laughed like I was being cute. You didn't have to do that. I saw you. That stopped her. Just for a second. Then the smile returned, thinner this time. Saw me where? At La Vita. Through the window. Her face didn't crumble. No tears. No anger. Just a perfectly timed eye roll, like I was the one out of line. Oh my God, Carson, she said. Were you spying on me? No. I saw you. That's all. With who? She asked, tone clipped. You tell me. You had your hand on his leg. She scoffed and tossed her bag on the table. Seriously? He's a colleague. We were going over a presentation. That's it. Linda, come on. That wasn't a meeting. She shook her head slowly like she was disappointed in me. You're acting paranoid. Maybe. But paranoid people aren't usually holding photo evidence. I slid my phone across the counter toward her. She looked down at it, then back up at me with zero reaction. Not guilt. Not fear. Just calm. And that unnerved me more than anything else. This, she said, gesturing at the image. This is what you're so worked up about? You lied. No, I didn't. I said I had dinner with a client. That's exactly what I did. With your hand on his knee? She shrugged. It wasn't like that. You're twisting it. I waited for her to elaborate. To reassure me. To reach for my hand like she used to when we were fighting. Instead, she picked up the umbrella I'd brought, inspected it, and muttered, thanks for this, though. That was thoughtful. That was it. I don't know what I expected. A confession? A fight? Maybe even a slap or two's worth of raw honesty. But she shut it down like a pro. And maybe that's what hit the hardest, how easy it was for her. How little effort she put into deflecting me. That night, she went to bed early. In the guest room as she had been doing for the past few months. My sleep's better in there, she'd said once. I had accepted it without question. But now every red flag that once seemed harmless was blaring in my mind. I stayed on the couch, phone in hand, staring at that photo until my eyes blurred. The image itself wasn't explosive. But to me, it was the fault line, the tremor before everything collapsed. And deep down, I already knew this wasn't the beginning of something. It was the middle of something I hadn't seen coming. The photo didn't leave my mind. It was the first thing I thought about in the morning and the last image burned into my brain before I fell asleep, if I slept at all. I kept opening it on my phone like maybe it would change, like maybe the lighting would suddenly reveal it as something innocent. But it never did. Her hand was still on his leg. Her smile was still that same soft curve I hadn't seen directed at me in months. Over the next few days, Linda acted like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't questioned her, hadn't caught her in a lie. She even had the nerve to suggest we have a reset weekend, as if a weekend trip would bleach everything clean. I told her I was busy with work. She nodded and didn't press. No sadness, no disappointment, just a shrug and a retreat back into her own orbit. That's when I started piecing things together. It wasn't just the dinner. That was just the visible crack. But once I noticed it, the rest of the fractures began to show. All the oddities from the past year, things I had brushed off or tried to rationalize, suddenly had new weight. They lined up like puzzle pieces I'd been too tired or too trusting to arrange. First, there were the trips to Portland. She started going there for consultations last spring. Linda worked in wellness management, part-time life coaching, part-time brand development. She'd tell me she had a weekend conference or a mentorship session. At first, I believed her. But looking back now, those trips were always vague. Never the same hotel twice. No itinerary she'd share. She used to send photos when she traveled, coffee shop selfies, skyline views. Then those stopped. Said she was trying to stay present. I remember once, Casey, our daughter, asked why Mom had left without saying goodbye. Linda texted from the plane, something about running late. But it didn't sit right even then. And then there were the clothes. I once found a change of clothes crumpled in the back seat of her car. A slinky top I'd never seen before, paired with jeans that still had the price tag attached. She laughed it off. Said she was going to a gym photo shoot with a client. But the cologne, there was a scent on the scarf she left in the car. Spicy, woodsy. Not anything I wore. Not anything I'd expect from a women's fragrance, either. That night, I washed it without saying a word. Now I wish I hadn't. I wish I'd kept it. I wish I had started keeping everything. Our marriage used to be a shared world. I knew her calendar, and she knew mine. We'd have dinner together 4 nights a week minimum. But sometime last fall, she started sleeping in the guest room. Claimed the mattress helped her back. I'd check on her late at night, only to find her curled up with her phone clutched in hand, the screen angled just so, always away from me. She started setting her alarm for odd hours, 3 a.m., 4:30, and when I'd ask why, she'd mumble something about early client calls in different time zones. I stopped asking. I told myself it was temporary, that she was just stressed, overworked. But maybe the truth was that I'd rather believe a strained marriage was still salvageable than accept that my wife had emotionally and maybe physically checked out. Even Casey noticed. She's 13, way too perceptive for her age. One morning over pancakes, she asked, "Why doesn't Mom eat breakfast with us anymore?" I told her Linda was working on a deadline. But my daughter didn't buy it. You could see it in her face, the beginning of suspicion. The way she started texting her mom goodnight instead of walking to her room. Even she felt the distance. Linda stopped laughing at my jokes. She stopped noticing when I shaved or dressed up. Her compliments turned into passive comments. "You're wearing that, or you look tired." Gone was the woman who used to kiss my shoulder in the morning. She became cold in the small ways, the daily gestures that make up the fabric of an * Macy. And I became the ghost floating through her life. She started making decisions without me. Booked a retreat to Tahoe in October, didn't tell me until she needed me to take Casey to school. I wasn't mad she went. I was mad I wasn't included, not even in the conversation. I felt like a roommate, a ghost, a stand-in dad when it was convenient. One night, I saw her smiling at her phone. It was the kind of smile that stretches slowly, the one you don't even know you're making. The kind of smile she used to make after reading something sweet I sent her. But when I asked what was funny, she locked the screen without missing a beat and said, "Just a meme from Kate." I said nothing, just nodded. But I knew it wasn't Kate. The next week, I started checking our shared phone bill. Nothing major at first. Then I noticed a number that came up almost every day, different times, different durations. Sometimes at 7 a.m., sometimes at midnight. When I asked who it was, she claimed it was a client going through a rough time. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But that's when I realized something else. I had been shrinking for a long time. Every time I had a gut feeling, I swallowed it. Every time something felt off, I rationalized it. I told myself I was overreacting, that Linda was just going through a phase, or maybe I was. But gut feelings don't go away when they're ignored. They multiply. They throb and pulse and take on lives of their own. I wasn't being paranoid. I was being gaslit. I was being pushed out of the center of a life I had helped build. We were married for 15 years. I thought I knew her. But now, she felt like a stranger. A carefully edited version of herself that only showed me what she needed to. And for the first time, I allowed myself to consider the possibility that this wasn't about stress or distance or timing. It was about betrayal. Something calculated. Something with roots much deeper than I had realized. I started keeping a journal. Nothing dramatic. Just notes, times, dates, her schedule, things she said that didn't quite match up. At night, I'd write everything down. Every gut feeling, every contradiction. It became my sanity, my slow march toward clarity. There was a moment, late one night, when I walked past her door and heard her crying. I paused, wanted to go in to comfort her, but I didn't. I just stood there, hand on the knob, paralyzed by uncertainty. Was she crying out of guilt? Or because she was being pulled in two directions? Or worse, because she didn't feel bad at all? I went downstairs instead and sat in the dark. In that silence, I knew this wasn't a phase. This wasn't a bump in the road. It was a rupture. And once trust cracks, even a little, it never reseals the same way. I looked at the photo again that night, the one from La Vida. I zoomed in on her hand, on her smile. I told myself it was just a touch, just one hand. But even a single hand, in the wrong context, can carry the weight of 1,000 words. And I was finally ready to listen to what it had been trying to tell me all along. I wasn't supposed to be home that night. My last meeting of the day got canceled last minute, which meant I'd be walking through the front door just past 6 o'clock instead of my usual 8:15. A part of me hesitated in the parking lot, considering whether to let Linda know I was coming home early. But another part, a quieter and more suspicious voice that had been growing louder lately, told me not to. So I didn't. I just drove home. The house was dark except for a thin trail of light spilling out from beneath the bathroom door upstairs. At first, I assumed she was in there alone. Then I saw it, clear as day, on the floor at the foot of the stairs. A men's dress shirt. Not mine. It was wrinkled, half turned inside out, and there was a faint scent coming off it. Sandalwood and something else, something sharper. My stomach twisted. I stood there frozen, staring at it like it might disappear if I blinked hard enough. Then the water upstairs shut off. I moved quietly, step by step, until I reached the landing. The bathroom door was still closed. I could hear movement inside, shuffling, the sliding of what sounded like a drawer, and then silence. My heart was thudding so hard I was sure she'd hear it. I waited. 10 seconds. 20. Then the doorbell rang. I nearly jumped out of my skin. The timing was too perfect. I turned and descended the stairs quickly, my thoughts already spiraling. When I opened the front door, I was face to face with a man I'd never seen before. Early 40s, square jaw, expensive coat. He looked surprised, really surprised, to see me. "Oh," he said, eyes scanning my face. "You must be Carson." His voice had that hesitant pitch people get when they know they're not supposed to be saying your name. "Who are you?" I asked, stepping halfway onto the porch. I'm looking for Linda," he said, clearing his throat. "She texted me to meet her here." I didn't move, didn't speak, just stared. That's when his phone buzzed. He pulled it out reflexively, and in that brief moment I saw the screen, an open message thread with a picture of Linda wrapped around him, grinning, her face pressed against his neck. The caption below it made my blood turn to ice. "Can't wait to be with you again. My husband still thinks I'm at my friend's place." I didn't say a word. I simply shut the door. He knocked once more, softer this time, then walked away. I watched him through the front window as he got in his car, sat for a moment, then peeled out of the driveway like he couldn't escape fast enough. Back upstairs, I heard the creak of the bathroom door opening. I didn't confront her. I couldn't, not yet. I needed to breathe. I needed to think. I went straight to my home office and shut the door behind me. And that's when I opened the folder. 3 weeks earlier, I had begged *N quietly setting up a private surveillance system. Call it paranoia, call it intuition, either way, I'd reached a point where trust no longer felt like an option. Linda was always on her phone, but it wasn't just the frequency, it was the behavior. Turning away mid-conversation. Suddenly leaving rooms. Grabbing it from across the room like it was a live grenade she had to disarm before I got too close. So I'd installed a system. One part was software installed on her tablet which she rarely used and never noticed had been connected to our shared cloud. The other part was physical, a discrete USB device hidden inside a charging hub in the living room. Nothing sophisticated. Nothing illegal. Just enough to sync cloud data and monitor activity logs. I wasn't proud of it. But I needed answers. That night, I opened the portal for the first time in earnest. I started with the GPS logs. Her phone had tracked locations through our shared family plan, something she never disabled because she assumed I never checked. Most of the locations checked out work, gym, Casey's school. But sprinkled in were outliers. Coordinates that matched rental apartments. Places in parts of the city we never visited. I clicked through the timestamps: Tuesdays, Thursdays, occasional Sundays. Hours she told me she was running errands or helping her friend Kelly with her art gallery launch. The same Kelly who had moved to Arizona 6 months ago. Next, I accessed her iCloud backup. It took nearly 2 hours for the encrypted files to fully load, but once they did, it was like stepping into a separate version of Linda's life. One I was never meant to see. I started with the photos. There were dozens, some innocent, some not. Images of drinks clinking in low light, feet tangled under tables, hotel room mirrors reflecting 2 figures instead of one. One photo caught me off guard, Linda in a robe curled up next to the same man who had just been on my doorstep. Her face was soft, peaceful, almost childlike. Then came the messages. Hundreds of texts archived in her notes app, an old trick to hide conversations that didn't appear in the main messaging app. I skimmed the most recent entries and felt the air leave my lungs. You make me feel seen. Carson hasn't looked at me like a woman in years. We need to move forward with the plan. I'm exhausted trying to pretend. If we push him a little, I think he'll break. That's what we need to get full custody. That last one stopped me cold. Custody. They were talking about Casey. I scrolled further. Linda had written drafts of potential statements, character references, incident reports she could give to a lawyer if needed. One message was particularly damning. We need to start planting the seed. He's distracted, agitated. If I keep documenting it, it'll look like emotional instability. She was staging something. Preparing. Like this had been building for months, maybe longer. Not just an affair. A campaign. A strategy. I wasn't just being cheated on. I was being undermined. Undermined as a husband, a father, and a man. The betrayal wasn't just physical. It was institutional. Tactical. And suddenly, I understood the coldness. The detachment. Linda hadn't drifted from me. She had made a deliberate decision to tear the foundation out from under me, brick by calculated brick. I sat there in the dark, staring at the screen, unable to cry, unable to scream. Just numb. She knocked gently on the door around 10:30. I'm going to bed, she said softly, like nothing had happened. I didn't respond. That night, I stayed in my office, piecing together every log, every message, every breadcrumb. I printed *TS. Organized timestamps. Created a timeline of deception so long it stretched across 2 walls. I built it like a case file because at that point, I knew that's what it would become. Linda had staged her story. Now I was going to write mine. I didn't sleep that night. The light from my laptop burned into my eyes, but I couldn't pull myself away. My hands moved automatically, scrolling, organizing, capturing *TS, while my mind tried to reconcile the woman I thought I married with the person whose digital footprint now told a very different story. The name came up over and over again in her messages. Jason Mills. I didn't know him, at least not at first. But after a few searches through her contact list and a check against LinkedIn, I had him. Jason Mills, licensed family therapist. Not just any therapist, one Linda had mentioned in passing months ago. Back then, she said he was an acquaintance from a conference, someone who ran group workshops on co-parenting and emotional intelligence. I remember her talking about him once during dinner. casually dropping his name while describing a seminar on rebuilding trust after trauma. She said it with a kind of admiration, like she'd discovered some guru with all the answers. I hadn't thought twice about it at the time, but now the name haunted every corner of her devices. Their messages had escalated from friendly advice to outright collusion. Not just romantic, but strategic. She wasn't just cheating. She was making plans. Long-term ones. Ones that involved our daughter, our finances, my mental health. One thread chilled me to the bone. Jason, if we're serious about this, we need to get the legal stuff rolling. Talk to my guy about custody. Your best sh*t is to show a pattern. Something erratic, maybe verbal friction. Do you think he'll push back if we plant enough stress? Linda, already happening. He's withdrawn, suspicious. He's working too much and doesn't notice the details. If I keep a journal, get a few voice recordings, it'll sound legitimate. Like I've been scared for a while. Jason, exactly. Build that. I'll help. Let's move things forward. That phrase, move things forward, showed up repeatedly. Always vague. Always suggestive. Sometimes followed by cryptic checklists. Step 1. Start narrative. Step 2. Stabilize finances. Step 3. Relocate. Relocate. I found a travel confirmation buried in her email drafts. A reservation for 2 one-way tickets to California, a city just outside Sacramento. She had used a fake name for herself, Melissa Kane, and booked a short-term rental for 3 months. The same city where Jason Mills was currently licensed. That's when the messages started making even more sense. Once we're settled, we can file from there. The court won't question it if we show a stable environment for Casey. We'll say I fled because I feared his emotional volatility. Nobody will blame me. I just have to trigger one outburst, one meltdown, and we're clear. She was trying to push me, to provoke something. Suddenly all the little moments came flooding back. The time she baited me with cruel comments, snapped at me in front of Casey, accused me of being unbalanced over nothing. She was documenting my reactions, trying to create a paper trail of instability. I'd felt the weight of it but couldn't define it. Now I could. It was calculated. I dug deeper. Using the cloud sync, I accessed her password manager and found encrypted folders titled Legal Prep, Jason M., and chillingly, Casey Plan B. Most of the contents were redacted PDFs, but the metadata revealed when they'd been downloaded and from where. Her laptop, Jason's office, once from a public library in Portland. I opened what I could. There were therapy worksheets, fake ones with notes in her handwriting about our marriage. Carson avoids conflict but bottles resentment. Emotional shutdowns. Stonewalling tendencies. Passive-aggressive. All words Jason had probably fed her to build a clinical profile. And then came the recordings. She had used her phone's voice memo app. I found 5. All clipped and edited. Cherry-picked arguments with key parts missing. One made me sound like I was yelling, but I remembered that night. I'd been raising my voice because Casey had disappeared from school without telling anyone, and Linda had forgotten to pick her up. My concern had been real. My tone had been protective, but stripped of context, it sounded off. I opened another recording. This one was different. A conversation between her and Jason, recorded without his knowledge. The audio was faint but clear enough. Jason, he won't see it coming. He's too trusting. Linda, that's what makes it so easy. Jason laughs. You're ruthless, you know that? Linda, only when I need to be. My stomach churned. This wasn't love. It wasn't even an affair in the romantic sense. It was a takeover. A hostile dismantling of my life from the inside out. Jason had no idea I existed beyond being the problem, the obstacle. I was a box to be checked, eliminated, reduced, and eventually erased from my own family. I backed everything up. Twice. By sunrise, I had hundreds of files, photos, audio, texts, geolocation maps, receipts. I put it all on an encrypted drive and hid it in my desk drawer. Another copy went in a safety deposit box the next day. And then I started making calls. The first was to Eric Thomas, a retired FBI contact I'd stayed in touch with over the years. I told him I had reason to believe my wife and another individual were conspiring to build a false mental health case against me for leverage in a potential custody battle. I didn't mention infidelity. That was personal. But this wasn't just personal anymore, it was premeditated. Dangerous. Eric agreed to meet. After one look at the materials, he said, "This is bad. Like criminal-level manipulation. You need to get in front of this before she makes the first move." He referred me to two people. One was a cybersecurity expert named Rena, young, brilliant, and terrifyingly fast. The other was a divorce attorney with a reputation for cutting through fabricated abuse claims like a surgeon. Her name was Laurel Mason, and within an hour of seeing the documents, she was outlining strategy. "We'll need to hit them first," she said. "You've got more than enough. If we wait, she'll beat you to the narrative." "But what about Jason?" I asked. Laurel tilted her head. "He's a therapist. If we prove manipulation and boundary violations with a client, I can have his license reviewed within a week." Rena, meanwhile, worked her magic. She found deleted threads, burner accounts, and alternate login locations. One from a device registered to Jason's office, another from an Airbnb router. She traced their shared digital footprint like a forensic surgeon. Every piece they thought was hidden, it was now in my hands. And what disturbed me most, they were proud of it. Their messages were full of smug little celebrations. Another lie pulled off. "He's still clueless. Casey doesn't suspect a thing." They laughed about me, mocked my patience. Jason even referred to me as the placeholder. But I wasn't a placeholder. I was the line they never expected to be crossed. By the time Monday rolled around, I wasn't just suspicious. I was prepared. I'd spent the weekend turning my office into a war room. Blueprints of betrayal plastered across whiteboards, folders stacked like dossiers, digital files cross-referenced and triple-backed up. Felt surreal. Like I was preparing for trial, only this one would take place in living rooms, courtrooms, and therapists' offices. Not in front of a jury, but in front of judges, boards, and perhaps worst of all, my own daughter. Laurel, my attorney, was the first to take decisive action. "We're not waiting," she said bluntly during our morning call. "We go on offense. If she wants to paint you as unstable, we're going to give the court every reason to question her fitness and credibility before she ever steps foot on the stand." The first motion was an emergency filing to freeze joint assets. Laurel had discovered 3 separate accounts under Linda's name, none of which were disclosed in our annual financial reviews. She'd been siphoning money for months. Small amounts at first, buried under plausible expenses, but it added up. One account was in California, the same town as the rental address, the same place she and Jason had been quietly staging their new life. We froze them all. Linda didn't know it yet, but by the time she poured her coffee that morning, her private funds were locked behind court orders. Rena, our cybersecurity expert, took the reins next. She built a digital timeline that would put most law enforcement reports to shame. Every communication between Linda and Jason, every location ping, every document timestamp, it was all there. But she didn't stop at Linda. Rena found something I never expected: Jason's professional records. Turns out, his past wasn't as pristine as he claimed. 2 prior complaints to the state licensing board for blurred boundaries with female clients. Neither escalated beyond internal investigations, but the documentation was damning. Inappropriate late-night texts, overly personal check-ins, sessions held off-site, all too familiar. One former patient, a woman named Sabrina, had been unreachable for years, until Rena tracked her down. She agreed to speak with us. Her testimony, recorded privately with Laurel present, described a nearly identical pattern to what I had experienced. Emotional manipulation, encouragement to isolate from a partner, and romantic advances disguised as emotional clarity work. "I thought he understood me better than anyone," she said, voice shaking. "He made me feel like he was the only one who could fix me, and that my husband was the reason I needed fixing." Her testimony would be our linchpin. With the evidence compiled, we scheduled a formal complaint to the state medical board. The case, bolstered by our recordings, messages, financials, and now corroborated with a prior patient statement, moved swiftly. Within 72 hours, Jason Mills was placed under investigation. His license suspended pending review. We served the first notice that afternoon directly to his office. Rena sent me the security footage. Jason, sitting behind his desk, dressed in one of his signature button-downs, froze mid-sentence when the courier handed him the envelope. His face went pale, then flushed red. He stood up too fast, knocking over a mug. The client across from him looked startled. He stormed into the hallway, waving the papers like a flag of outrage, but no one stopped the process. It was official. He was under fire. But I wasn't done. That evening, Laurel drafted a joint restraining order against both Jason and Linda. She discovered disturbing language in their messages, references to reframing the narrative, and even one line that read, "If Casey freaks out, just say she's confused. We'll have the therapist back it." That therapist? Jason. They were orchestrating Casey's perception. It was the final line we needed. The next morning, Linda was served at home. She was still in her robe when the process server knocked. I watched from the upstairs window. She opened the door casually, probably expecting a package, only to be handed the envelope and a grim expression. I saw her lips move. "What is this?" The man didn't answer. Just turned and left. She stared at the documents for a long moment. Then she slammed the door. That night was different. She didn't speak to me. Didn't argue. Didn't try to smooth things over with one of her usual lines. She just moved through the house like a ghost, avoiding my eyes, whispering on the phone when she thought I was out of *T. She knew. She knew the game had flipped. The next day, it got worse for her. Laurel released a controlled leak to a local news affiliate, one known for its investigative pieces on ethical misconduct. The story didn't name Linda directly, but it outlined the case: a licensed therapist allegedly engaging in an inappropriate relationship with a married client and conspiring to manipulate custody proceedings. The article went viral within our community. It wasn't long before names got attached. Jason's photo was pulled from his practice's website. A thread popped up on a local forum titled "Jason Mills, the therapist who crossed every line." Comment after comment poured in. Some anonymous. Some not. A few hinted at similar experiences. The court of public opinion had entered the chat. I kept Casey away from it all. She was at a friend's house that weekend, a planned sleepover we didn't cancel. I wanted to shield her from the fallout for as long as possible. But she wasn't clueless. That Sunday night, she came home quiet. I offered to make her cocoa like I used to when she was younger. She nodded, sat at the table, and after a long pause, said, "Is Mom in trouble?" I froze. I prepared for this moment but hadn't expected it so soon. I sat across from her and took a breath. "There are some things happening right now that Mom and I are trying to work through. Some serious things. But none of it is your fault. And none of it changes how much I love you." She nodded slowly. "Is that man, the one who gave me that bracelet, is he part of it?" I remembered the bracelet. A silver one with a clover charm. Linda said it was from a boutique in Portland. Casey said it was from Mom's friend Jay. I didn't answer right away. I didn't need to. Her eyes said she already knew. "I won't see him again, right?" she asked. "No," I said softly. "You won't." The next morning, Linda's lawyer reached out. The message was clear: settlement. Quiet. No contest. Laura laughed when she read it. Now they want to play nice. But we weren't interested in nice. We were interested in truth. We countered with terms that bordered on scorched earth: sole custody, no unsupervised visits, asset forfeiture of hidden accounts, and a public apology to avoid additional civil liability. They accepted. All of it. 3 days later, the signatures were in place. Jason disappeared from the online directory. His practice shut down. Linda's professional accounts, her coaching business, her brand partnerships went dark. Quietly, she began contacting old friends, likely trying to salvage what was left. But most of them had already read the article. Already chosen sides. She was radioactive now. The kind of person people whispered about in grocery store aisles and closed their doors to when she came knocking. But I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. Relieved, yes. Safe, finally. But not victorious. There was no winning something like this. Only surviving it. That night, I walked into Casey's room and sat at the edge of her bed. She was reading, hair tied up, her face more grown up than I remembered. She looked up and smiled. "Is it over?" she asked. I nodded. She reached for my hand. "Good." And just like that, the quiet I had been waiting for all year finally arrived. Linda didn't fall all at once. It was slow, like watching scaffolding unravel from a building that was already hollowed out. Once the legal dust settled, her coaching business lost nearly all its clients. A few issued polite statements about reevaluating their associations. Others just vanished. She tried to pivot, new website, new branding, new name. But the internet doesn't forget, and neither do people. The article was still out there, the **TS still circulating in private message groups. Her reputation had rotted from the inside. Then Jason left. Not with a bang, not even with a goodbye. One day he just stopped responding to her messages. His phone disconnected. His lease expired. A mutual contact told me he'd checked into a rehab facility 2 states over. 6 weeks later, he took his own life. Linda didn't even go to the service. I should have felt something. Pity. Closure. But I felt nothing. I focused on Casey. We moved 2 hours north into a modest house near the lake. Quieter. Smaller. Ours. I opened a local branch of my design firm, scaled down operations, and found myself actually enjoying work again. Not as an escape, but as something I owned without compromise. Casey blossomed. She asked hard questions. We had harder conversations. But we never lied to each other. The wall that once existed between us, built from suspicion, silence, and whispered phone calls, crumbled. She became sharper. Wiser. But not cynical. She never asked to see her mother. Not once. Linda wrote a few times. Letters, mostly. Long, rambling pages of sorrow and nostalgia. I never opened them. I stored them in a box at the back of my closet, not out of vengeance, but because I knew some things didn't deserve answers. The last one came on a spring afternoon, written on the back of a photo, our family trip to Glacier Park. Her handwriting was shaky. I miss us. I hope you don't hate me. I slipped it into the box with the others. Hate had never been the point. Years passed quietly. 10, then 12. The house by the lake became a sanctuary. A place for birthdays, study sessions, and eventually empty nesting. Casey went to law school. She specialized in family justice. Said she wanted to help people who didn't have anyone else in the room looking out for them. She rarely talked about her mother. But I saw traces of Linda's betrayal in Casey's fire, in the way she cross-examined the world with precision and empathy. She never contacted Linda again. When people asked, I told them Linda moved away. It wasn't a lie. She had. From us. From herself. I retired 5 years ago. Mornings became walks along the shore. Evenings were books, vinyl records, the hum of a world that finally made sense again. The photo I took that night outside La Vida sat in a frame on my desk, not as a wound, but a reminder. A catalyst. With Laurel's help, I created the Foundation for Truth in Custody, a nonprofit offering legal resources to parents falsely accused or manipulated through emotional deceit. Casey serves on the board. We don't talk much about how it started. We let the mission speak. In the final stretch of my life, I often thought about regret. About forgiveness. About the sharp lines between justice and compassion. But when I pictured Linda now, I didn't feel hatred. I felt distance. The kind that doesn't ache anymore. The kind that finally lets you rest.